day number 2 as we begin Seeking Contentment, the name of the little daily programming that I'm doing, reading a psalm, reading a proverb. If you have any prayer requests, feel free to put those in the window. As I said yesterday, I think I have to go to another window to see those, but I will try to check on those as we go throughout and see if anybody drops prayer requests. I know I was just looking on YouTube. We have a church YouTube page as well that isn't quite as well traveled, but I've gotten a comment on yesterday's readings and positive comments. So that was cool and encouraging to see that. So you can catch it on YouTube. Just search for Nederland Church of Christ, Nederland Avenue Church of Christ. We don't have, you have to have 100 subscribers to make your name more simple. So it's like all kinds of numbers and letters after youtube.com. So go and subscribe. If you haven't subscribed, just search for Nederland Church of Christ, Nederland Avenue Church of Christ. Can't remember one of the two. And it'll pop up and you can subscribe. And these go onto our Facebook page every day and onto the YouTube page every day as well. So also, if you're working at 9 in the morning, feel free to hop on our church Facebook page or the YouTube page, and these should be chronicled there day by day, and you can listen and watch if you like as we read a psalm and read a proverb every day. I know I mentioned before in preaching, I think I mentioned yesterday too, if you read a proverb every day, by the end of the month, you read the book of Proverbs almost. So depending on which month it is, some February, you'd have to get a couple extra chapters in if you're going to read it, but not too much harder work. But so we'll be reading through the book of Proverbs each month as we go through, even though I guess we're skipping the weekdays, so you have to fill in the weekends. But anyway, we'll get you close if you follow us. So, all right, I'll try to get to it. Got a guest today in a little bit here, but I'm going to read Psalm chapter 2. And then I'll introduce him, and he's going to read Proverbs chapter 2. So, Psalm chapter 2. Why do the nations conspire and the peoples plot in vain? The kings of the earth rise up, and the rulers band together against the Lord and against his anointed, saying, let us break their chains and throw off their shackles. The one enthroned in heaven laughs. The Lord scoffs at them. He rebukes them in his anger and terrifies them in his wrath, saying, I have installed my king on Zion, my holy mountain. I will proclaim the Lord's decree. He said to me, you are my son. Today I have become your father. Ask me, and I will make the nations your inheritance, the ends of the earth your possession. You will break them with a rod of iron. You will dash them to pieces like pottery. Therefore, you kings, be wise. Be warned, you rulers of the earth. Serve the Lord with fear and celebrate his rule with trembling. Kiss his son, or he will be angry, and your way will lead to your destruction, for his wrath can flare up in a moment. Blessed are those who take refuge in him. I have a guess, as I said, couple days a weck, probably shoot for Tuesdays and Thursdays, unless something comes up and may hit another day, but I'll try to have a couple guests each week. But I'd mentioned kind of the idea, one of the ideas I wanted to do with these readings is the idea of seeking contentment. And I'm going to interview, a little short interview as to how I know these people in different walks of life, different time periods, and then share a little bit about them and say, hey, how are you seeking contentment? We'll read the Philippians chapter 4 in just a little bit. But as I was thinking about the first person to invite, this guy popped into mind. I was actually watching, I'll mention a little bit his YouTube channel, mentioned more succinctly a little bit, but watching him, and I thought, man, this is one of the best potential candidates for having on to share, as I feel like I'm getting old also, though, as I invite him on here, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But Jonathan Orr from Gainesville, Texas, let me pop him in here if the technology works right. 3, 2, 1. All right. Can you see me? I see you, Jonathan. All right.
Yes, sir.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. I can hear you.
All right. Well, go ahead and read Proverbs chapter 2, and then we'll get into a little bit more of how I know you. Some people that are viewing may know how I know you. Most people probably don't know how I know you. But anyway, go ahead and read Proverbs chapter 2, and we'll get a little bit further into that.
All right. Proverbs chapter 2. My son, if you receive my words and treasure up my commandments with you, making your ear attentive to wisdom and inclining your heart to understanding. Yes, if you call out for insight and raise your voice for understanding, if you seek it like silver and search for it as hidden treasure, Then you will understand the fear of the Lord and find the knowledge of God. For the Lord gives wisdom from his mouth, come knowledge and understanding. He stores up sound wisdom for the upright. He is a shield to those who walk in integrity, guarding the paths of justice and watching over the way of his saints. Then you will understand righteousness and justice and equity, um, every good path. For wisdom will come into your heart, and knowledge will be pleasant into your soul. Discretion will watch over you, understanding will guard you, delivering you from the way of evil, from men of perverted speech, who forsake the paths of uprightness, to walk in the ways of darkness, who rejoice in doing evil and delight in the perverseness of evil, men whose paths are crooked and who are devious in their ways. So you will be delivered from the forbidden woman, from the adulteress with her smooth word, who forsakes the companion of her youth and forgets the covenant of her God. For her house sinks down to death, and her paths to the departed. None who go with her come back, nor do they regain the paths of life. So you will walk in the way of the good and keep the paths of the righteous, for the upright will inhabit the land, and those with integrity will remain in it. But the wicked will be cut off from the land, and the treacherous will be rooted out of it.
Thanks, sir. Lots of good stuff there. As I said, Proverbs power packed with all kinds of great stuff. Plug my computer in. I thought I had it plugged in. All right, Jonathan Orr. Like I said, many of you know him. Many of you fear him. No, just kidding. Good fella. I was trying to think. Jonathan, how old are you? I'm 46.
I am 37.
37. Okay, so nine years younger than me. When I moved to Sweeney, Texas, I think I was about 23. So that means you're about 14 whenever I moved there. So I was trying to recall. I knew you were close to middle school, but Jonathan Orr lived in Sweeney, Texas. At the time, I had gotten married, and Brooke, my wife, we had just gotten married and moved to Sweeney, Texas. And Jonathan's dad was the preacher at Sweeney, Texas, and he was about 14 as I moved there. And he was in my youth group at Sweeney, Texas, the very first job I had full time working. I remember going in and meeting Jonathan and seeing the pizza under the bed in his bedroom and empty. I don't know. What did you use to drink? Mountain Dew, or I'm trying to remember.
That was Dr. Pepper all the way.
Oh, Dr. Pepper. Okay, I knew it was a soda, but I couldn't quite remember. But empty 2-liter bottles of Dr. Pepper then is what it was. I couldn't quite recall. And wrestling VHS tapes scattered around the room.
Oh yeah.
But anyway, yeah, I knew, and their house was right next door to the church building. So. And so Jonathan, his sister Janae, maybe one day I'll interview her. Ironically, her husband is now the preacher at the church that my father-in-law is an elder. So lots of crisscrosses relationships there, interestingly enough. But anyway, Jonathan grew up in the first youth group I had. I look back, as sometimes we look back at life and our first jobs and things like that, or first experiences, and think, man, I could have done so much better, with the tools I have now. And so look back and laugh a little bit. But what do you remember, Jonathan? I know I mentioned earlier I've gotten a nickname from that era, which people occasionally, when I interact with someone from then, they'll say it, and it's in the back of my mind still. But share a little bit about that too. I can't quite remember how I got that nickname, but I almost remember. But anyway, share a couple of remembrances from that era and how I got my nickname and what it is. What the
All right.
is.
Okay, so I'll start off with remembrance of that era, and then I'll give you the story about how you got your nickname, because I remember it very distinctly. All right, so that era in Sweeney, we had been probably 6 or 7 years without a youth minister. I think the only other youth minister we had when I was there, because I got to Sweeney in about 92, about 8 years old and 9 years old, something like that. And I was going into fourth grade. I remember fourth grade was my first year there. And I think my brother Mark was the only youth minister we had, and he was there probably maybe 6 months or a year. And so all that time we didn't have a youth minister, and we had a lot of kids. And so when we finally found out we were having a youth minister, I remember, you coming in and uh, establishing Bible studies every night and really giving us a lot of activities and a lot of great teaching and a lot of great memories. I remember I was when you asked me to bring up memories, the first thing I thought of is we all went to a a camp with another youth group. I want to say it was in Jasper, Texas,
Yeah,
and
that's right. Camp Red Oak Springs. It was sort of a little retreat, mini retreat. It was with Riverside Church of Christ from Lafayette. That's my in-laws' church. Yeah, at the time.
oh wow, I didn't realize it was them. Okay, and
Yeah,
so I remember two.
Virgin Aza now. Yeah, that
Yeah,
same church.
yeah. And so I remember two stories from there because you and Brooke were just so amazing, and I can't express how wonderful a time I had and how much I enjoyed having y'all as my youth people. You as a youth minister, and Brooke was always there helping as well. That was right when y'all got married, and y'all didn't have
Mm,
any kids yet, and so y'all
Billy
really
West.
made time for us. I remember one thing in particular before I get back to that story. You would always take everyone to breakfast, and I remember you taking me to breakfast and getting to eat some good food before we went to school and everything like that. And I thought that was so cool that you took that time out to do that. But two funny stories from that. I remember, I want to say it was on the same trip, but you were getting gas and you were young and spry and everything like that. You know where I'm going with this,
Yeah.
and you were like, okay, well, it's pumping gas. I guess I'm going to go in to use the restroom. And you tried to, athletically, like Michael Jordan, just leap over that gas line, and you just tripped and fell, and just all of a sudden, you didn't act like anything was wrong, but I believe you were just busted all the way open.
On my
And
chin. Ross Trevino. He was in the back seat of the van, and Brooke was in the front. And I dropped you off at Taco Bell and something I can't remember, get food. And I was in a hurry to come back and pick you all up, so I had the automatic gas thing on, and to where it pumped the gas automatically. And I had the windshield wiper little thing they have squeegee at the gas station. So I was wiping the windows off real fast, and I was like, man, I got to get these windows done before the gas is over. And the gas line was about that far off the ground, about 2 or 3 inches. And so I was going back to get fresh water from my squeegee. And as I was jumping back over the line, my toe caught that line, and I landed right on my chin, directly on my chin. And I remember
ooh,
Ross looked at me and he was like, and I was like, wait a second, why is he looking at me like that? And then I walked up to the front of the van where Brooke was, and I looked at her, and she was like, I was like, wait, something must be wrong. And I looked in the side, I pulled the side mirror like that, and then I had blood just coming out of my chin, and I was like, this isn't good. I was like, oh no. Yeah, that was quite it. And I ended up going to Jasper Hospital at like 2 a.m, and there was this old man. I guess they just called him in. He was probably retired, and they called him in when they needed him. And I remember his hands were really cold, and I was thinking, man, this guy's going to stitch my chin up. It's going to look like trash. But first thing he said, because I was debating on whether to get it stitched up, first thing he said was, man, I'm glad you came in to get this stitched up because it wouldn't heal up very good. And I was like, oh, okay, I get it. But anyway, he did a good job of stitching it up. So actually, I had stitches inside of the stitches. You can get like stitches.
oh.
You can get deep stitches than the outer stitches, and so it was like 4 stitches inside and 5 stitches outside, I think. But anyway, yeah, one of my only times getting stitches in my life. But
And I remember later that whole weekend was just full of fun chaos because I remember later that weekend, you and the other youth minister, we all the guys just had these big plans to go raid the girls' cabin, and I think our goal was to toilet paper it, but I believe some of the guys went a little far, and from my remembrance, y'all were okay with it, maybe.
I don't remember. I remember y'all wanting to. I can't. I thought we were trying to shut it down, but I can't remember.
No,
But if
it
it happened,
happened.
if
It
it happened, it
happened,
happened. I guess.
and I remember like I was with a couple of the other guys, and they like were like throwing bottles and breaking stuff, and it just turned into like this big over thing. And I still remember the look on Brooke's face as she walked out of the cabin, and she was just beelining towards you. And I think I remember her yelling, understanding because we had just TP'd and we had sprayed shaving cream and oh my goodness, it was a mess. And
Did y'all have to clean it up? I'm trying to remember.
yes, we did.
I remember making you clean it up. I think because you had made the mess.
Yeah,
I
we
forgot that part of the. I remember that retreat, and I remember going on that. I didn't remember that. You remember better than me, probably though.
yes, I remember that, and also I think I remember us watching a like during communion we watched like a video of Jesus, but he was like it was in Spanish. I don't it was something. I just remember a lot of fun times from that youth group, and I remember. But back to how you got your name. So we used to go take communion to this older lady named Irma Early, and she was probably late 80s, early 90s at the time.
I remember her in her house well. Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, she always kept it on like 95 degrees in there. She would always try to make us dance to "Sing and Be Happy." But I remember you had missed because we started that with my brother Michael before you got there. It was in the probably early '90s when they started. Michael and Nathan Burrow and Jeff Lee and Jeremiah Brooks and guys of that era who were about 6-7 years older than me. And I started going with them, and we kept that tradition going. And you always came with us and stuff like that. And I think you missed a couple of times, and it was me and Nathan Burrow and a few other people and Michael Mansell. And she was always like, "Where's Williams? Where is Williams? Where's that Williams? Is he still there? Did he get fired?" And like, I don't know, she would always ask where Williams was, and so we started calling you Williams. And then when there was an internship that I believe Michael and Nathan were in the internship, but they also let me. They also let me and maybe David Hankins and Mansell tag along. And my dad, we had Mansell, and then we had Williams, and then my dad just out of confusion one day he was like, "Hey, where's Wenzel? Can you go get Wenzel for me?" And we're like, "Who is Wenzel?" And so we just.
I didn't remember that it was your dad. I couldn't remember, but yeah, Wenzel was my nickname for good. And does your dad still call me Wenzel if he would reference me? I don't know.
He probably does. He probably does.
It seems like somewhere along the way that I saw him and something he said Wenzel or something. I don't know.
And I remember your desk. Eric Trevino got a sign and put Wenzeltopia on there for where your office was.
I didn't remember who it was, but I remember this sign.
Yeah, that was E.T. Eric Trevino. So.
That's funny. All right. Well, another recent development with Jonathan. He references brother Michael and he has a brother Mark and also a sister Janae. But I don't know if I didn't listen to any of the Spotify. But anyway, they have a show that they do. I know I watched YouTube. If you're on YouTube, you can search for Or Brothers podcast. Here's the. I don't even know if the whole thing shows up. There's a bunch of letters after. That's what I was saying, like our church thing. But anyway, go to YouTube. There's the link actually, but also you can search for Or Brothers Umbrella the Or Umbrella Video Podcast.
Yeah.
Go back.
Or Umbrella Video.
Yeah. Or Umbrella Video Podcast, and they do. They've done an interview already with. If you have interest in wrestling, I grew up watching wrestling, and when I was at Sweeney, I watched it not with as much interest as I did as a younger boy, but I watched it quite a bit. Jonathan rubbed off on me a bit too, and we did go to an actual live. We were talking the other day, a live Monday Nitro event in Houston with a bunch of people from church. That was fun. But anyway, Jonathan and his brother Michael have a video on YouTube of interviewing Lodi, the wrestler from Ravens Flock. And it's really even if you're a wrestling fan and don't know who Lodi is, it would be an interesting interview to watch just because he shares some interesting stories about how things work kind of in the background of the wrestling life and how he became Lodi and how he became a wrestler. It was kind of a out of the blue thing a little bit, but it's a really interesting story. And now, what is his real name? I can't remember.
Brad Kane.
Brad Kane. Okay, I was thinking Eric or something, but Brad Kane is his real name, but Lodi, he goes by as a wrestler. But now he's a Christian, and he goes and speaks at some youth rallies and conferences and things like that. And they also wrestle still. And at the close of the show, some of the indie shows, he'll talk about the gospel. They'll let him go and talk for a few minutes at the end. So that's pretty cool. Anyway, any other reflections on that interview, Jonathan? Kind of general.
Yeah, I mean, it was pretty surreal. I mean, we've interviewed I think four people for our podcast so far, and it's been kind of a wide variety. We also have the Orr Brothers podcast, which is a strictly Christian podcast that we do, and you can find that on Spotify and Apple as well, Apple Podcasts as well. That's the Orr Brothers podcast, but the Orr Umbrella pod.
You can just search for that, right? Go to Spotify and search for it. It should pop up. Yeah.
Yeah, and so the Orr Umbrella podcast is where we're branching kind of out and trying to do a little interview show, and we've got various guests coming up, including Ed Gale, who played Howard the Duck. I'm really excited. I'm really excited about that. But we've interviewed people who have just done various walks of life, actors and YouTubers, and a guy who works for the Basketball Hall of Fame who hosts a show I really like, and so that's on our Spotify. We haven't got those up on YouTube yet, but Orr Umbrella, Spotify as well. But yeah, the interview with Lodi was really good. We've really enjoyed interviewing. It's one of those things to where when you're in a pandemic, you kind of have an opportunity for new skills and new things because you have a little bit more time. And so I've always enjoyed interviewing people. I've always enjoyed various subjects, and so that's just been a really cool thing. Lodi is man, some of the stories he brings out were just surreal to me because you see him on TV and you think things are a certain way, and then he just gives you these little nuggets, and you're like, oh wow, I never thought of that. Or
you hear the background too, yeah. It's like how it came together, and it's amazing. It's amazing to hear how not randomly, but I mean it's sort of random in a sense. But and then all of a sudden, the Hollywood Blondes, their tag team, the story on that, it was like to hear that story, how sort of the universe lined up for it to happen. It's like wow. How some of those wrestling bits come up, and some of them are planned and intentional, but some of them are sort of which they try them to see what's successful, of course, and then some of them that are surprisingly successful and surprisingly unsuccessful, perhaps too. I guess when they think something's going to work well.
Yeah, and I think the coolest thing for me is seeing all that from a Christian perspective and from a perspective about how it affected his life and how his relationship with God was able to help him overcome some of the bad habits that pro wrestlers seem to get into, especially of that era. And so it's definitely a very interesting way to see things, through the eyes of a Christian who lived the life of a celebrity, and how he was able to kind of overcome that celebrity lifestyle and really dedicate his focus to God, and how he says, this is God wanted me to do this. God wanted me to do that. It's an incredible thing to hear somebody who I grew up listening to, who I never would have guessed was, a Christian man, but that's.
Get to that point now, yeah.
Yeah,
it was really neat. The last quarter or third or so, he talks a lot about his Christianity. So, anyway, check that out. YouTube. Look for Orr Brothers or Umbrella Video Podcast, and a lot of neat wrestling stories if you're a wrestling fan, and also he talks about his Christianity as well. So. It's really cool to reflect on as well, kind of the life's transitions, and as time moves forward. Jonathan has went to Sunset Institute's distance learning. I don't know what you call it or what if it had a name. A lot of videos and things like that. It wasn't up in Lubbock. I guess maybe he went to Lubbock some. I'm not sure, but
some.
For ministry training, and he's been the youth minister in Gainesville at church there for about 5 years or so, I think it was. And recently he stepped away from that and transitioning a little bit. But anyway, talk a little bit about that, your ministry training, and kind of moving into full-time youth ministry there for a bit. And it's kind of cool, like I said, to reflect on impressions of sometimes you think in ministry, man, am I doing any good, or am I making an impression? And it's always encouraging to look back and go, hey, maybe I did something right, But go ahead and give us
Yeah.
just a minute or two on your training and some of your youth ministry experience.
Okay. So I graduated from the Sunset International Bible Institute in 2010. I So they decided they have this thing to where they can set up their school in different churches, and so they set up a school at the Needville Church of Christ, and I went there from 2005 to 2008, and then I took a year off and did some things, and then they offered a new course to kind of give it a Bachelor of Biblical Studies, which means good things to Christianity, but means nothing to the outside world sometimes because it's a preaching school. But and so I came back and finished and got my 4-year degree from there and finished in 2010, and then I worked for Wichita Christian School and did some coaching and did some teaching there, some Bible teaching. And then in 2010, I was hired back at the Needville Church of Christ.
I forgot about that for a little bit.
Yeah. And so I preached for about 4 years, about 4 or 5 years, and full time. And then I transitioned to youth ministry. And preaching was great. I enjoyed it. Both times I had my time where I'm like, okay, well, I need to move on and do something else. And youth ministry was always on my heart and in my mind because that was my favorite part of working with kids and everything like that. And then in 2015, I was hired as the youth minister here in Gainesville. And, going back to what you were talking about with wondering if you're making a difference, I look back at Needville and I can see kind of those differences that I've made. I look back at the Normandy Church of Christ, which I was at for about a year and a half, and I can see some positive impacts I've made just by talking to different people and everything like that. Here, it's probably going to be a couple of years before I can really see what's happened because everything is so fresh. People are still so young. I've only had a couple of people graduate, even though it's been 5 years, that were in my original youth group, and all of them are growing up and struggling, and some of them are doing good, and some of them aren't doing so good. And I think it's a difficult thing, and this as a youth minister. You were a youth minister for 10 years, probably.
12 years.
12 years, and so you see some of the successes, and I've become friends with some of the people who were in your youth group in Simple through camps and everything, and through Riley, who came a little bit after you. And so I see them, and I know they're great people and doing God's work, and have worked with me at church camps and everything over the years. But with the youth ministry here, it was a situation to where I would say 85 to 90% of the kids did not have, a typical family to where there were two parents who went to church, and, most of them came from broken homes or were raised by their grandparents. And there was a lot of problems and a lot of projects. And so walking in, it wasn't a strong youth group. It wasn't leadership in that among those kids to where you could really pinpoint, okay, these kids know the Bible, these kids are living a good life. And it was a rough group. It was a ragtag. What is that?
A lot of building.
Yes.
Yeah.
A lot of building. And so some of those kids became products of their environment. And the thing about it, though, is I still haven't given up on any of them. I'm still in contact with many of them, and I'm still trying to encourage them. Some of them are doing great right now, and some of them I can point to and be proud of their faith and them trying to do their best. But it's definitely when you get emotionally invested and emotionally attached in people, and you spend so much time and you spend so much effort and so much energy, um, and they don't go the way that you would want them to go, it can be very disheartening. It can be
Yeah.
very frustrating. And so you kind of blame yourself, like you talked about, when you were at Sweeney Well, oh man, I could have done this, I could have done that. I think we have
Mhm.
a lot of that in ministry to where we look back and we say, oh man, if I just would have said this, if I just would have done this, if I just would have tried that. And it can be
Oh,
easy to be,
you had your experience in tool belt, and you can't use those tools early on, and that you have now, of course. But yeah, and ultimately, it's up to them to make that decision. And like I said, we want. I know I coach soccer. We call it joystick coaching. Whenever you're like, Jonathan, run! He's still the boss. You get him in the corner. You're like telling them everything to do. Which theoretically you tell them in practice and teach them in practice, and in the game they're on their own, and they either do the right thing or don't do the right thing. They have ministries a lot like that. You coach them up as much as you can, and like I said, in some cases leave and a little bit further, even though technology helps to be a little more connected these days as opposed to 20 or 30 years ago. But still, yeah, they're on their own and kind of walking on their own. Let's look at I'm going to transition a bit here to Philippians 4. I mentioned yesterday, one of my favorite verses or favorite context of verses, because everyone knows Philippians 4:13. I can do all things through him who gives me strength, or through Christ who gives me strength. But I'm going to go ahead and read Philippians 4:11, 10 through 13, but 11 and 12 particularly talks about contentment. And that's something that we lose sight of in relation to Philippians 4:13, I think, and why Paul was able to write Philippians 4:13. We all cheer Philippians 4:13, but we don't really cheer verses 11 and 12 sometimes. So I'll go ahead and read it, and then, like I said, we'll get your comments here as we close things up. I rejoice greatly in the Lord that at last you renewed your concern for me. Indeed, you were concerned, but you had no opportunity to show it. I'm not saying this because I'm in need, for I've learned to be content, whatever the circumstances. I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I've learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. I can do all things through him who gives me strength. And of course, Paul was able to write, as I said, Philippians 4:13, because he had learned, as he says there, the secret of being content. And as we read in the context of the Bible, Paul's life, he was in some really bad places that, that we if we only experience one out of I know in 2 Corinthians, he lists about 10 or 15 things in a row. And if we experience one or two of those, we go like, holy smokes, what's going on, and he experienced all those things. He gives a list, but he says, hey, I've learned to be content, through those things, through the good things. So anyway, to the point of what I wanted to get people's experiences, you shared a little bit about yourself, and you're kind of transitioning, I know, right now to a new job, and the challenges of the pandemic going on around us, and some of the other things that we're experiencing in life. What is your secret to being content as a Christian? Share a few nuggets with us, if you will.
okay, I'd love to. I was thinking about this, and you asked me a couple of days ago about the interview, and I think the one thing that I try to do to stay content is always try to count my blessings. Like, I was praying last night, and I was just thanking God for absolutely everything that I had, instead of focusing and worrying about what I didn't have or what I wished I would have had more of, or because it is a different transition for me right now. I'm still trying to figure out. I've technically got a job, and I'm doing training for it, and that's kind of been my focus lately, is hours and hours upon hours of training to get ready to start. It's like a 40-hour training before you can actually start and everything like that. So I'm doing that training and doing everything that they asked me to do to get ready to go out in the field and everything like that. But I'm still trying to decide. But in that midst of uncertainty, in that midst of not having a job for the first time in a decade, I really came to lean on God in ways that maybe I wasn't as strong before. I really think of Paul's contentment in all situations. I know what it means to be hungry. I know what it means to be well fed. I know what it means to have plenty. I know what it means to have little. All of those things, like the balance that you have when everything is going great, and the balance you have when everything is going not so great, really points to your mindset and your mentality when you look at your life and you look at what it's really all about. And when you understand that, one thing I always try to tell my youth group is, even if you feel like you're waiting for that one thing that you're putting all your eggs into the basket of, you still have a purpose, and you still have a ministry in Christ that never ends. You wake up every day with something important that you can do for God, somebody you can talk to, somebody you can affect. You can improve your prayer life. You can improve your knowledge of God. You can continue to work on those relationships and continue to reach out to people and continue to be thankful for everything that you have. And so it really is a mindset, but it's also an understanding of just what is truly important. And I believe this pandemic has really taught us the things that we can live without and the things that we can't live without. And if
Mm.
we have a mindset of what's really important, then we can deal with a whole lot of things that we never thought we couldn't have dealt with before. And I think Paul really spoke to that there. That even if his health was bad, even if his what
Billy was angry.
yeah,
Yeah.
even if he wasn't welcome where he grew up, or everybody had turned their back on him, or he had worked with people who had just all of a sudden just turned away. I'm surprised how quickly you've been bewitched, and everything like that. He talked about in the book of Galatians and everything. Yeah, in Galatians. And so even emotionally, physically, circumstantially, things were really rough on him. He continued to push forward. He continued to move on. And I think also to 2 Corinthians 12, where he was like, Lord, please take this away from me, take this away from me, take this away from me. And, the Lord said to him, my strength is made perfect in weakness. So I'm not going to take this away from you. And he's like, all right, well, then if I can't move away from this, if I'm continuing to be burdened in this situation, then I'm going to brag about everything that's going wrong so that I can show people that regardless of how broken I feel, God is still using me for something powerful. And so that is the joy, that's the bragging, that's the boasting that I'm going to put about, is look what God can do with my broken circumstances and my hurtful situations and my uncertainty, my insecurity. He can lift me, he can shine me as a light, and he can do his work through me regardless of whether everything seems perfect or everything seems not so perfect.
Yeah, and I think to just make an application a bit as you shared the scripture principles there, sometimes we reflect on our own life, and when we're in a little bit of a rut, or maybe a little bit of a, as you said, transitioning for yourself as a downtime or a dormant time, sometimes as we seek to minister, we can look back maybe a year from now or a couple years from now and say, man, I was kind of in a rut or kind of messed up then, but God still used me in a way, B way, C way, and just like Paul as he reflected as well. All right, man. Hey, thanks for sharing that. As a lot, like I said, a lot of scriptural principles thrown in there. I like that, and I really appreciate, as you were talking, I was thinking of 14-year-old Jonathan. Even though sometimes people, I think it was Jesus, they talked about a prophet isn't, doesn't have honor in his own country, and I remember someone telling me one time I was looking for an internship, and I was looking to go to my church home or a church I was connected with, and they said, well, that's going to be hard for you because they'll see you as a kid, And I was like, oh, no, they won't. No, they won't. Which I didn't go there anyway. But in some ways, I still see you as 14-year-old Jonathan. But as I have more discussions like this with you, I'm like, man, I'm proud of that guy, and who you're becoming. So that's awesome. I know even whatever you do, as you said, as you told your youth group members, I know if you go into working in the general public or whatever you do, I know you'll still be ministering to people and under the even though they may not be aware, but in your own way, you'll be encouraging, reaching out, like I said, being a light. And I appreciate hearing those encouragements from you. I tried to look over in the other window. I don't see any particular prayer requests. So since I didn't have any of those, will you close us with a prayer, Jonathan, as we close our time together here?
I'd love to.
All right.
God, we thank you so much for this day, waking up again and having the opportunity to serve you and having the opportunity to be present with each other, to discuss your word and to discuss the power that you give to our lives. We're so thankful for the ability to be content, not necessarily comfortable, but content in the way that we live, to understand that regardless of what we have, that we are taken care of and we are blessed and we are capable of doing great things for your kingdom and living a purpose-filled life, regardless of whether or not everything is perfect or shiny or happy. We look back at Paul and we look back at some of the examples, and we're just so grateful that we can go to those examples, especially the example of Jesus and all of the things that we read in your word about you and what you want for us and what we can do for you and what you've promised us and what you've commanded us and all of the facts that we can see within your word. I pray for Michael. I pray for his continued ministry, and I pray for his program here to where he's able to bring so much joy and so much light and so much truth and so much encouragement to everyone. And I pray that everyone watching here and everyone who's gonna watch at a different time can truly be encouraged and blessed, and that every show he does from here is just continues to bring that message forth that we can be content and we can find joy in your presence, regardless of if everything is shiny and happy. We can always have joy and peace and comfort in your almighty word and in your beautiful presence. And we love you, God, so much, and we thank you for everything that you always do for us. And it's in Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen. All right. Thanks, my friend, for spending a little bit of time with us this morning and sharing a little bit of your story, our story. I guess you could say too, in a sense, reflecting on a couple funny little stories. But all right. Blessings on your day, my friend. Thanks for being
You too,
here.
man. Absolutely.
All right.
Anytime. Thank you.
All right. See you, buddy. Bye.